Coming up on Video Game Nation.
I fall in love with Gravity Rush on PS4. Dan and his beard talk up the merits of the PS Vita.
Remote Play Alone ensures that your Vita will still be of use for as long as PlayStation 4 is still of use.
IFA contrasts home consoles to handhelds, and our plucky bunch of hand-picked eggheads apply their brains to game physics.
That's this week on Video Game Nation. Hello television friends. High def, high five. Gravity keeps your feet on the ground, and if you give it enough time, it'll get your nipples there too.
A force-defying quirkfest, this week's game is Gravity Rush, a charming open-world adventure that's gotten a transfer and remaster for the PS4 4 years after its original release on the PS Vita.
Some physics-bending games are just a tech demo disguised as fun, but this is the game that, when I was playing it on my Vita, my housemate leant over, looked at it and just went, well, that deserves a bigger screen.
Aesthetically, Gravity Rush is an adorable cartoon. Set in a tan and gold utopia of cobbles and bricks, you are a cute amnesiac named Cat, whose only friend is a little black cat.
This is about 3 songs away from being a Disney film.
Except the cat is made of stardust, the town's floating in the sky, and the town's been ripped apart by gravity storms, which you'll fix by jumping into the chest of God and kicking headless spiders made of shadows.
Forget what I said, it's not a Disney film, it's just a normal anime. You're lucky she's not married to an octopus who eats ladies' underpants or something.
There's more than a touch of Studio Ghibli about this. The few characters who talk are funny, there's a big adventure wrapped in nostalgic cel shading and endearing accordions, and the protagonist is talented but hopelessly naive.
It's a rule. When you're watching a Japanese cartoon, the only person who should have less of an idea than you do about what's actually happening is the hero of that cartoon.
And Kat's not just an amnesiac, she's an amnesiac with the power to change the direction of gravity. So she doesn't fly, she just falls in a different direction.
Which leads to my favourite part.
Anyone who's standing near you will fall into the sky as well. Take that, innocent women and children! You will never see your families again.
Gravity control is a rare mechanic in a genre where all a chubby plumber needs to fly is just a bit of a run-up and a magic hat, but it's made the odd appearance.
A late level in 1994's Sonic & Knuckles made the roof the floor, and webgame Karoshi turned physics manipulation into just another existential problem.
But until Gravity Rush, the most amount of time I'd ever spent playing with Gravity was on the options menu of the original Rise of the Triad, which was an early 90s gory as hell bullet fest. And when you switched the Gravity to Luna, when people blew apart, they just never came back down. You'd end up going through a run through a storm of what used to be a person and was now technically chutney. So I asked the panel, what do you think makes Cat's gravity mechanics so unique?
I think the Vita made Gravity Rush so unique to me. It was one of the first games I played on the Vita, and the sense of moving the screen around as you rush towards the ground or just burst up into the air it's really exhilarating in a weird way. I think just because you're tilting everything up while the whole game's tilting as well, sort of adds an element of coolness to it.
Obviously we've seen games before that kind of play with gravity and the rules of gravity, but what this game does, it kind of adds an open world environment and gives you a lot of freedom as a player to sort of explore and create your own rules within that world. So you can choose whether that thing you're looking at is a wall or a floor, and then you've got the freedom to try something else, and that's quite innovative, I think.
I love that Gravity Rush replaces the idea of like flying with falling. You know, this, rather than having this like control, you have this real loss of control that's so overwhelming. It's fantastic.
Well, I mean, I'd argue that Gravity Rush, although it's really interesting use of gravity, I'd argue that it's not, in fact, unique. I think games have played with gravity, with our sense of gravity and our sense of our place, ever since the beginning. So, you know, we've always loved this idea of being able to manipulate what is like the fundamental force in our lives. You cannot do anything about gravity, or we're victims of gravity, whatever we do. So, you know, it's natural for games to explore it. So, Gravity Rush is a really interesting game, but it's not unique. We've been playing with gravity ever since the beginning.
For me, the thing that makes the gravity mechanics so unique in Gravity Rush is that it uses gyroscopic controls without being dreadful, which I don't think has ever happened before or since.
So, the art style is pleasing and you'll fall where you wanna, but what are we playing?
There's a pinch of the sandbox to Gravity Rush. You've got a cute little headquarters in the sewers, some costumes to change into, a detailed world to explore, and the usual challenges and goodies to pick up. Just don't expect to buy houses or run into random events or NPCs who respond to you outside of set dialogue points. For all her powers, Kat is just a gifted new resident in a bustling town.
That said, there's the obligatory skills to acquire and levelling up to do, so you very swiftly become that town's newest superhero.
And once you master the controls, the fights are zero gravity ballet with added nosebleeds. Kat may be naive, but that doesn't mean she can't dive in and tear the heart out of her enemies.
So it's a charming game about a superhero with brain damage who shouldn't keep falling on her head, but whose powers mean that she can in any direction. I asked the panel, what other games came out of nowhere and surprised you?
So I heard a lot about this indie dogfighting game called Luftrausers, and it is amazing. It's the best game in the world. It's so simple and so perfect, and it's completely addictive and absolutely spot on perfect for a handheld.
I was really surprised by Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. And the deal is that it comes with like a manual you have to print out, and then one of you like plays the game, like diffuses this bomb, according to instructions that the other person is reading out. So the other person can't see the screen, and they have to like frantically work out what the instructions are and shout them at you. It sounds like trying to put a bit of IKEA flat pack furniture together, but in actual fact, it's much more entertaining.
This is probably a controversial choice, but do you remember Blinks on the original Xbox? The cat that could rewind time. You could just rewind things and you can change the course of the levels and you can change different events happening. I love that game. Underrated.
The game that really took me by surprise, and this was when I first started in games journalism, was Pa Rapper the Rapper, based around a rapping dog. And it was such a weird epoch-shattering moment, but it was also a really interesting thing in that it was Sony communicating to people that games weren't about 14-year-old boys in their bedrooms anymore. Anyone could play, and games could be artistic and different and surreal. And you really can't get much more surreal than a dog being taught how to rap by an onion-headed karate expert.
The game that surprised me the most recently is probably Until Dawn. Every choice feels so important, so you get so involved with it. The characters are so fleshed out, you really care about each and every one of them. And I was just totally hooked. I could not put the controller down, which was the last thing I expected when I booted it up.
Gravity Rush offers up a neat game mechanic wrapped in a world that serves it well. I normally get annoyed when open world adventures send me on fetch quests. Of course I do. I'm a married man with a mobile phone. Half my life is stopping what I was doing and going to fetch some milk.
But Gravity Rush gets away with a few common open world tropes through sheer character. Kat wants to help people, and there's enough comedy and beauty that I was genuinely excited to go and find a chair for her little house in a drain.
I can't actually think of the last time where I played a game where I really wanted to help the main character decorate their house.
And that's the contrast I love in the game. You might be in a flying city that's been besieged by thugs and monsters, but there's great moments of gentleness that aren't boring. Originally called Gravity Days in Japan, that's days as in concussion, not calendar, Gravity Rush is as appealing as it is misnamed.
Now here's Aoife with what makes the handheld experience so different from a home console.
To be honest, I've never been much of a handheld gamer. I own a 3DS and a PS Vita, but they've been on a shelf gathering dust pretty much since the day I bought them. I just don't have much of a commute, and when I am at home, I prefer to play on a big screen. But for a lot of people, gaming on a handheld console, or increasingly their phone, is a great way to squeeze in some extra gaming time in between work or life commitments. Other people just find it more comfortable and loads more affordable. Gone are the days when playing something on a handheld device would mean you'd have to expect a considerable step down in terms of complexity and quality. You'll have to settle for a smaller screen, sure, but you can now experience franchises like Uncharted, Killzone and Resistance that would have once been confined to home consoles, coming very close to feeling like the real thing. And with the rise of shorter, more experimental and more compact gaming experiences, you don't always need a hugely powerful machine in order to have fun. Of course, playing on a handheld device won't always be the same as playing on a console, not just because of the smaller screen, but for the simple fact that handheld devices lack the size and thus much of the memory and processing power of a larger computer. Simply put, you won't be getting a port of The Witcher 3 on handheld consoles anytime soon. Thinking about handheld gaming in particular though, that size gap is closing all the time. Games that launched on consoles years ago and were considered vast for their time are now being adapted and ported quite easily to mobile phones and tablets. You only have to look as far as the Zelda duo of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, alongside the seminal Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, to see how successfully the games of yesteryear made the jump to the Nintendo 3DS. These games certainly aren't bad for when you want a retro kick on the train just before work, so long as you don't mind the controls being a little different from what you remembered. It's also great when it's a game you missed out on the first time it was released and never really got round to playing, so you can see what all the fuss was about without having to resort to some elaborate retro console setup. Probably the biggest advantage handheld gaming has to console though is how reasonably priced mobile games tend to be when compared to their home console counterparts. That won't mean much to people who already own both, but just think about how daunting the concept of gaming can be to someone who never got into it when they were younger and wants to give it a go now. You wouldn't know where to start. You'd have to buy a new console for a couple of £100, then you'd have to buy new games for potentially £50 or £60 a pop. Instead of all of that, handheld gaming offers you a cheaper, more accessible option. You can even buy a sizable game like Final Fantasy or XCOM Enemy Unknown for a £5 on your tablet or phone, and many games are free. If you like it, great, go grab another. If not, it's not like you're out of a lot of cash and stuck with a very expensive paperweight. Basically, it all depends on what you want to get out of gaming. Me, I like a big screen, I like a controller, and I like a sofa, but if you're stuck for space or time, or you just want a more casual experience, handheld gaming can be the perfect compromise.
Break time now. Tweet at us at #VGN, like the Video Game Nation Facebook page, and we'll see you in just a minute.
Stop backing away, I'm just talking about a game.
Starts the 25th of February on Sky Arts.
Welcome back. Game physics are the laws that govern the action in your game. How far can you fall until you die? How quickly can you run? Why can everyone somehow carry a gun that's bigger than they are? Here to explain all of that to you without a single science degree between them is the panel.
Games they have to have physics, right? They have to have physics. If they don't have physics, then you can just tell that there's something wrong about them. I think it all goes back to pinball, you know? Like you play a pinball machine and, you know, the ball has real weight. It really bounces off stuff. And I think, you know, if you're ever playing anything like that in a game, if it doesn't have a feeling of weight, if it doesn't, you know, interact with other things in the environment the right way, your brain just picks up on it. Even if it's unconscious, you just know the physics are wrong, and not in a fun way.
You know, in our daily life, we can't do these kind of amazing feats, but you get into a video game and you can go into space and see what, you know, what physics happens when you combine with this and this, and the science based with it. I think it's just limitless. There's so many possibilities that you can do with video games that makes it so exciting that it's just, I think, the best platform to explore physics with.
If physics are good, you shouldn't notice them. Like, the world should just react in the way that you expect the world to react, and the only time you tend to notice physics in games is if, like, you walk into a bush and none of the leaves move or something like that, and you're like, ah, rubbish.
I remember when games first introduced like the ragdoll system with enemies, gone with the pre-scripted death sequences, you know, when you shoot someone, they're like, and then they all die in the same way. And then now it was like, depending on where you shot them or where you hit them is how they're gonna react, and it's like, and you could see that, and it was like, yeah, I'm hurting that guy. He's hurt. Someone help him, he's hurt.
It's, you know, it's nice to explore and play with things and go to extremes that you maybe couldn't, because in real life physics, the laws of physics are stubborn little monkeys, aren't they? Which I think that's an Einstein quote.
Definitely my favourite physics-based game, and in fact, it's a game I've probably talked about before, and in fact it's the best game ever made, is Portal 2. Valve has an amazing understanding of the appeal of video games and the appeal of being in a 3D space, and nothing makes you feel more alive within a game than being able to mess around with the physical rules. And no one has ever understood that as well as Valve, and no game has ever done it as well as Portal 2.
I think Half-Life 2 It's the first game I remember playing that even I was like, ooh, physics! Like you could pick things up with a gravity gun and like there was even a little puzzle where you had to put things on a weighted seesaw and in order to figure it out. And it was the first time I remember playing a game and being like, ooh, physics-based puzzles, aren't physics exciting? And I think I joined the physics train.
I love the physics in the Burnout games because I want to see cars like smashing into the back of other cars in the most spectacular and satisfying way. And I love that Burnout challenges you to do that and kind of says, okay, you know, let's just see how many cars you can jump over and smash up in one go. That is a fun game.
So my favourite game, which uses physics in an interesting way, is probably Mount Your Friends. So it's all about sort of getting higher up on top of your opponent. And it's more about the way that the body moves in that game, which is very unique, I would say. You kind of have to see it to believe it. So yeah, I would say the physics in Mount Your Friends is outstanding.
I think Kerbal Space Program is a great template for how physics can be used in the future, you know, because that's a game that is really fun, is essentially a sort of puzzle action game that everyone of all ages can enjoy. But by playing it, you sort of sneakily get taught real physics. You get taught real, just ideas about space and about rocket science. You know, it literally teaches you rocket science and you don't even know it, just smuggles it in there. And I think for that reason, the Kerbal Space Program is kind of the template for what I'd like to see more games do. I'd love more games to teach me stuff about the real world that's at the same time fun.
I would like to see a physics simulator that simulates my GCSE physics class. So there's just like a really boring man, like talking about maths and space and that, while I sat at the back reading Just 17.
I mean, it's been talked about, but I would like to see totally destructible environments. I would love to see a massively multiplayer game where you are in a city and through your combat and through your actions, you destroy that city. Because I think like post-apocalyptic games are so common now, but we never really get to see or take part in the destruction, which is really, which I find like kind of frustrating. Like in Fallout 4, you emerge from your bunker and the world is destroyed. But I want to destroy the world. I want to push the button. I don't want to be the person that I don't want to be the loser that wakes up afterwards. I want to be the guy with the red button, pressing that and destroying everything, and then getting to glory in the magnificence of the end of humankind. Stop backing away. I'm just talking about a game. I wouldn't do it in real life.
I really enjoyed Peggle. I really enjoyed Peggle 2. So the next thing I'd like to see from physics simulators is Peggle 3, please.
So Gravity Rush was a winning physics-based game, but for all of its acclaim, it wasn't enough to save the poor old PlayStation Vita. So now, here comes Dan and his beard to fight the handheld's corner.
This is an urgent appeal from Videogame Nation to help rescue endangered consoles. Neglected, misunderstood, abandoned by its owners. How could anyone treat a handheld so horrifically?
But with your help, we can find a home for this misunderstood machine and others like it.
How ironic that PlayStation Vita, a system whose very name means life, is considered all but dead by most. Last October, Sony admitted that all of its internal development teams were focused exclusively on PS4, support from major Western third-party publishers has all but dried up, and even the once reliable indie development community is shying away from porting its wares to the handheld.
But look at it, that curvy physique, those pert little analog sticks, that fulsome, glossy touchscreen, that cheeky rear touchpad just waiting to be stroked. It's everything you could possibly want from a handheld.
So why, just 4 years after its launch, has this surprisingly powerful palm-sized wonder hit such a low that even its parents won't return its calls? More importantly, why should you still consider picking one up?
To answer the first question, you're looking at it. This is the Vita's proprietary storage format and its Achilles heel.
In a world where SD cards are accepted as the universal mobile storage medium, even by the notoriously contrary Nintendo, Sony decided to wee into the wind and ended up stinking of ammonia. It wouldn't have been such a critical problem had the bundled memory card held more than a game and a half, or if the higher capacity cards matched SD card pricing rather than tripling it.
Sony would have you believe that the strength of the mobile gaming market is to blame for Vita's struggles, but you only have to look at the 54 million Nintendo 3DSs sold around the world to realise that the problem lies closer to home.
Of course, it's not just down to an ill-judged storage decision. Sony's games, good as they are, just didn't understand the medium as well as Nintendo, and largely failed to court that most important handheld audience of all: kids. Sony also undersold Vita's incredible crossover functionality with PS3 and PS4. Features like cross-play and cross-save that allow games and progress to be shared and transferred between home console and portable should have been front and centre in all advertising.
And remote play. Just like the Wii U's gamepad, you can stream PS4 content directly to the Vita, whether you're on the loo in another part of the world or on the loo in another part of the world.
Some games even automatically optimize their control schemes to suit the Vita's layout, making games like Destiny, Drive Club and Fallout 4 a dream to play on the small screen.
And so I've accidentally stumbled into the reasons that a Vita is still worth picking up. Unless Sony decides to axe it for no good reason whatsoever, remote play alone ensures that your Vita will still be of use for as long as PlayStation 4 is still of use.
Then of course, there's the games. As I say, if you're expecting anything to rival Pokemon or Animal Crossing, you'll be disappointed. But if you're in the market for console-quality originals and ports, or the ability to play the world's finest indies on the go, there's plenty here to caress your pleasure centres.
And on that note, here are 5 of my personal Vita favourites in no particular order whatsoever.
The ultimate version of this dungeon crawler / high school simulator gets off to a typically slow start, but soon pulls you in with its crazy mix of tarot-inspired mysticism, Jungian psychology and teenage melodrama, then refuses to let go for a good 80 hours. An absolutely stellar exercise in pure arcade thrills that flawlessly blends top-down blasting and side-scrolling shooting. The sort of game that looks impossible, but plays like an absolute dream. If only more Vita games exploited the system's impressive range of functions like Tearaway. This magical adventure from Little Big Planet creators Media Molecule creates an amazing sense of connection between the player and the game's papercraft world, building up to a climax that'll plaster a big grin on your face. If there's one thing eccentric developer Jeff Minter likes as much as llamas and camels, it's Atari's classic 1981 shoot-'em-up Tempest. TXK represents the culmination of Minter's efforts to refine and expand on its inimitable formula, imbued with his trademark psychedelic graphics, pulsing electronic rhythms, and reflex battering action. An indie gem from Celador Games that combines all the best elements of roguelike play with meaningful progression. What that actually means is a procedurally generated castle that changes layout after every death, randomly generated characters with all manner of game-changing quirks and disabilities, Dark Souls levels of sadism, and near-endless replay value. It's also available on PC and consoles, but Vita is its true home.
Vita's long-term prospects as a self-sustaining gaming platform look grim, but when considered as an essential companion console for PlayStation 4 owners that also happens to have an incredibly solid back catalogue, reports of its death might be greatly exaggerated.
That's this episode done. Like us on Facebook, tweet at us at #VGN with your innermost thoughts and feelings, and we will see you next week.
We're racing towards our episode of The Chase tonight on Challenge. Bradley and his crew of brain boxers will be here at 7:30.